and welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. This is Bart. And unfortunately, the United States has been eliminated from the 2022 World Cup. A 3-1 loss to the Netherlands in the round of 16 sends the boys packing back to their homes. Unfortunately, a little bit shorter than we think maybe we would have liked, but probably about the long stay that we would have expected. To talk about the game and the tournament performance as a whole, I have two great friends with me. U.S. keeper, Thomas, you're back. A little bit disappointed, but I think there's some positives to look forward to.
Yeah, disappointed for sure. I mean, I think for as much as I wanted them to win, I think I went into it realistically saying it's probably not going to happen. If it does, great. But I think the future is bright. I'm excited to for this group of players to see where they go from here. It's a shorter cycle. The next time around, we're already 6 months into it, so it's going to move quickly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of exciting things to come with this group, and there's another group of players that we're going to see, coming in over the next couple of years that are going to be some new exciting faces.
And also joining me, USMNT Corners, Caleb Cook. Caleb, a 3-1 loss to the Netherlands probably feels a little unjust, but we made it to the round of 16. What's your just general take on that as we start?
Well, I think we said it, all the podcasts leading up to it. The expectation for this squad, this young team, was to get out of the group, and they did it. So you go into the round of 16 against the Netherlands with, you're playing with house money. There's not a ton of pressure. The players probably felt a little bit more pressure because, they're being told, and obviously so, like what professional athlete is going to step into a locker room preparing for a game thinking, all right, we're going to lose. Or you go out there to win. So they felt a little bit, but at the end of the day, the U.S. were never going to win the World Cup this year. It wasn't going to happen. It could have gone a couple different ways. Maybe 3-1 sounds way worse if you just see the line score there and you didn't watch the game. I think there's a lot of things to be proud of. I think Thomas nailed it. Future's bright and excitement. I think those are two things we can kind of hang on to. And, next 3.5 years, it's going to be a lot of soccer, a lot of new faces. Hopefully one new face that we can all probably agree on that we'd like to see. I'm sure we'll get to that at some point. But, yeah, I mean, I'm not angry. Not like super, super mad. I think we all have to keep it in perspective. I think that's probably how we all feel.
Yeah, I think there's multiple perspectives that you have to look at this game from. And one of them is that just in this tournament itself, it's very clear that the Netherlands are a better team than the US is at this point in time. I think that it's also pretty clear that when you look at the whole tournament leading up to the game anyway, and I think it played out this way a lot in the game. The reason we lost 3-1, and the reason several of the goals that were scored, a couple of them anyway, were that the U.S. seemed to be very tired, to be quite honest. Our legs looked to be heavier. We looked a little bit slower to respond to stimuli around us. And I think we were just tired compared to the Netherlands. And that's clearly, again, just because of the fact that the Netherlands as a full team has more depth and better quality than what we have. And I know people don't want to hear that, but that's the reality. Yes, we can talk a little bit about Greg's quote about Memphis Depay being a Champions League goal scorer when we have plenty of Champions League goal scorers on our team. That's absolutely true. But there is a difference between having an entire squad of guys who play regularly at that level and our team that has, not even a full starting 11 of guys who are constantly playing in either Champions League or Europa League. So let's just understand that this team is growing, it is improving, but there's still a lot to improve on. But Thomas, this game, as 3-1, I do feel like was a little unfair to the U.S. But at the same time, none of the 3 goals the Netherlands scored were undeserved. Is that? I mean, they've worked well for him.
There's great combinations of the goal. I mean, you can criticize. I mean, there's the first and the last goal. I guess are my 2 biggest issues. I think there was marking issues on them.
Oh,
Adam
absolutely.
Adams on the first and Robinson on the third there. But yeah, the buildup was great on that. Matt Turner had no chance. I mean, you can't save something like that. I mean, it's just they just broke you down, and they had the goal opportunity. So again, to your point, they were tired. I think they're mentally tired, physically tired, and not having that balance and even healthy lineup. I think resulted in that. And you got to give them their due. It's going to be it's going to be a great match that they play with Argentina. So you know, they've shown pretty well. I did expect the U.S. to score a little bit more. They did have some great stat line, shots on goal, shots attempt. They actually had more shots on goal in that match than they did in all 3 previous. So, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, look, this team has struggled to score goals for forever under Greg Berhalter, Caleb. So we were going to struggle to score goals against the Netherlands. We knew that we were going to probably have to score 2 goals, and obviously that didn't happen. They got 3. We only got 1. I don't want us, though, to look at that scoreline and think that the U.S. didn't do anything positive in the game, because I think there were positives. I mean, I do think that from an offensive standpoint, we did a decent enough job. I mean, sure, tactically, the Netherlands forced us to play a certain way, but like we weren't not creating opportunities. Maybe not clear-cut chances; those did not come. But like we were doing okay against them.
For sure. I think one of the biggest positives is the fact that we showed our quality. We showed that we can play and hang with the big boys. I think, Pulisic scores a minute and 20 seconds into the game. Netherlands approached the entire game differently. And, you know, who'sies
Yeah,
and what sits and what ifs and, maybe. But what I'm saying is you look at the line score, you see 3-1, and you think, without watching, holy smokes, the US got it handed to them. And that's just not it's not the way it was. We played decent.
no,
The goals they scored, yeah, they put themselves in good positions. They had good movement. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to say we gifted it to them, but when you're hitting those unmarked, when
yeah,
you're striking Memphis Depay on the first one, when you're hitting that strike one time unmarked, it's a lot different than when you got pressure on your shoulder. It just is. The
yeah,
second goal, Serginho Dest, watching. Third goal, Anthony Robinson, watching. I think you nailed it when you said, yeah, tired legs, but I think there was a lot of um, mental exhaustion.
yeah,
People want to look at the shallow depth, and that is a major problem. I think we need to be deeper as far as a pool goes. But Tyler Adams, for example, playing every second of the group stage, yeah, that's one thing, right? It's a lot of minutes. But then you look at the type of minutes that they
hmm
were. You look at the last game leading up to the round of 16. That's the Iran game. And for 30 plus 35-ish minutes, those were extremely taxing uh, minutes on those guys, legs
yeah.
and minds. I mean, they were playing for their lives there. And I think it really showed against the Netherlands. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm going to struggle with analyzing this game, and what I have struggled with analyzing this game particularly, is it's not a game that happened in a vacuum, Thomas. It's not like, oh, these teams just happened to meet one day and play soccer. And I think, again, when we're talking about the tournament being over, you have to talk about the program state as a whole. And I think that this is just an example of where we are. Because, I think a lot of people commented like, "Oh, we didn't seem as intense or we just weren't as clicked on mentally this game." And I think that's fair. But to Caleb's point, we had just played 3 group stage matches that were high intensity. We had to be 100% on it all 90 plus minutes. And it's hard to do that 4 games in a row, despite what people who sit at home think, or despite what Carly Lloyd, who pretends like she's had it hard in her life, thinks. The US had to put out 3 very intense matches in a row. And that weighs on you. Now, obviously, the Netherlands weren't not playing hard matches, but they got to play Qatar. We didn't. That's probably the best example I can give. So I think for me, again, it's just you can't look at this and say, oh, well, the Netherlands is so much better, because one, they are, but there's a reason why they were A, so much better today, and then B, why they were able to not have that mental and physical exhaustion leading into this match.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing. Getting one match that's easy. You know what I mean? That's not something the U.S. has really had in the history of World Cup, is having an easy
No,
result. And so
we've been the
you know,
easy match most of the time.
right. I mean, here's the thing though. They were so close on these matches to having a 2 or 3 goal potential lead at times.
Yep.
So that's the thing. Like, and so that excites me, because it's saying we're close. It's not a fluke. It wasn't grinding it out type of things every game and just getting 30% possession and doing very little and countering with it. It was, they had chances. They were there all the time. And you're right. 3 games like that, and pretty much the same lineup for those 3 matches was, it's hard to sustain. You're getting 4 days in between them. That's not a huge amount of time to recover and get out for that, for that next big game. And I think that's where you hit the wall. And that's the difference between having that extended depth, in your roster, to
Right.
be able to say, okay, we're going to rest a couple guys here in these matches because we're going to have a 2-0 win or whatever it is. And I think that's the difference. I think we're going to see that improve over the next cycle, though. I think that they're going to start figuring out how to finish. They're going to start, maturing in that way, and finding, that sweet spot, because it showed. I mean, it showed against the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And it really did. They just need to have better finishing. That Pulisic scores
Well,
that
I mean,
first goal.
look,
It's a different game.
depth was a problem all tournament, as you just mentioned, right? Like, you look at the subs that the Netherlands brought in, and you're playing at Champions League, Europa League level, right? That's their subs. Our sub was, no offense to them, Jordan Morris, you know, Kellen Acosta, Shaq Moore. These are the subs we've had to use throughout the tournament. And I'm not throwing shade on the players necessarily specifically, but like, it's just very clear that our depth is not at the level that the Netherlands and teams above them are. And I need people to understand that, because like, criticizing the fact that we didn't beat the Netherlands the way that some people have been is just, to me, Caleb, a little foolish, because it lacks the perspective, and it lacks an understanding of the 2 programs as a whole, let alone the 2 teams that lined up on the field. And yeah, look, we can blame Greg for our tactical issues, because there were, and we'll talk about that next question. But overall, it's like, yeah, Greg and his team weren't as successful against Louis van Gaal and his team, because the Netherlands is a better soccer team with better soccer players overall.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you look at U.S. soccer fandom, you can break them into subsets, right? You've got casuals. So their takes are based on what they see, read 15 minutes before the game, hear an announcer say something, their takes are whatever. You can take them or leave them, it doesn't really matter.
Charles
Then you've
Barkley
got
joking we're going to open up a can of whoop ass
yeah,
on them is
and
fantastic, but also unserious.
right, and people taking it serious, like Charles talking so much, like guys, chill out. But again, so that leads me to the other subsets, right? You've got some other people who, all of us that are super active on Twitter, we're nerds. Okay, we're nerds, and that's okay, and I love it, and I accept it, and I own it. But within the nerd group, you have one set that it doesn't matter what happens, there's always going to be a negative spin on things, versus the other group that's a little bit more understanding, pays attention to context, has perspective. Um, so a lot of people that want to sit there and throw shade on the players, the manager, all that kind of stuff for losing to the Netherlands. I mean, they're just going to have that take no matter what. Um, I'm trying to learn to engage less and less with those types of people. The mute button is a fantastic tool on Twitter for that. Um, but I think Thomas said it, and you've said it, I've said it, we've all said it. We It's not like we played terrible. It's not like we were playing and punching above our weight the entire time, the entire tournament. We have quality. We're just lacking the final, the final pass, the final shot that just, we're so close. We're so
Yeah.
close. And that's why I think, regardless of how you feel about Berhalter, like him, love him, hate him, I think a new face can help.
Yeah, I think we're all three kind of in agreement that like, and I'll try to summarize my own takes on the tournament as a whole. That this tournament, though it didn't end with a much better result, if you will, it's not like we made progress, quote, on the field. Like measurably, no. We still lost in the round of 16, something we've done just about every single time we've gone to the knockouts. Obviously, 2002 was great, but like that's just kind of what happens here. We get out of the group, congrats, but we lose in the round of 16. But I do think that overall, you watch the team play, and it wasn't a team that was playing behind the ball. It wasn't a team that was playing with just tough grit and determination. This was a team of players who were able to dictate much of the game that they played. I mean, I think of the 8 halves we played, or the whatever, I don't do math, but what is that, 360 minutes? Yeah, 360 minutes that we played. We looked really good in the majority of those minutes, right? We looked like we were a team who belonged. And, we didn't play a team ranked lower than 20th in this tournament. But that brings me to kind of what, the negatives of what kind of happened in this game, because I think that tactically we were set up similarly to what we have been before, where obviously we're going to try to build out of the back through you know, finding midfielders who hopefully can connect passes and find find midfielders who can work with our striker, and then find a winger cutting in from behind. That's the general Berhalter style. We want to try to find wingers who can either get the ball in space or in behind. A lot of possession, 58% possession. Obviously, again, those are skewed in a tournament because toward the end we were the only ones with the ball. But passing accuracy at 80%, 17 shots, 6 of those on target, forced Netherlands goalkeeper to make 6 saves, 5, 6 saves, something like that. Like, the numbers say that we played really well. But, Caleb, I feel like the Netherlands was fine letting us have a lot of possession because they set us up in a way that allowed us to have non-dangerous possession.
And I think they were banking on the fact that we can't finish. I
That's a
think they
great bet
looked
to take.
they looked at who we've been for the last year and a half. We're dangerous. We look scary. We got a nasty growl, but at the end of the day, there's no bite. And I think they banked on the fact that, yeah, we'll give them possession, we'll hit them on the counter because we've got guys that can finish when they have opportunities. And I mean, it worked for them. Kudos to them. They have a lot of quality. It's just one of those things where the disappointment comes from the fact that we were close. Um,
Mhm.
and it could have possibly been a different outcome. And there could have, I mean, you look at upsets this entire tournament, Morocco over Spain today. Who had that? Who had Germany going out in the group stage? There's been upsets all tournament long. So why not have an upset with the US over the Netherlands? So I think that's why there's a little bit of disappointment, but at the end of the day, those of us that are that are you know paying attention to what's going on, that follow the team closely, that sit there and look up scouting reports on teenagers, you know, like we're we're excited for the future because we know that at the end of the day, the experience that was gained over these last 4 matches is invaluable, and we're going to come into 2026 on home soil in our prime with experience. I mean, those are a lot of ingredients that make for a
Mhm.
pretty decent cocktail, I'd say.
Yeah, and Thomas, this game, Kayla mentioned the upsets. This game, it's not like we were dead in the water from the start. I don't think I want to get have that message come from this. Like we all very much believed there was a way for the United States to win, and again, watching the game, we had chances. We looked in control of ourselves throughout the game. I mean, what do you think was really the difference from our standpoint that we were unable to do to put us in better positions to both score but also win this game?
I think, honestly, I mean, we talk about experience or lack of. I think it kind of falls on the manager a little bit. I think there was a little bit on Greg that maybe just was not anticipating. He did it in the first 3 matches, which I was impressed with. It's almost like he just didn't do it or didn't prep it
Yeah,
for a potential matchup with the Netherlands. And I think that's where it happened a little bit. I mean, we've seen comments, from you know, I mean, looking like, oh, how many times has he been the Netherlands manager? I mean, he's done it several times. It's
yeah,
I mean, like that experience, I think, is not as a player but as a coach. How are you going to ramp it up to the next one and figure that
yeah,
piece of it out? Because I mean, the team played very well, but there's it's again, every round progress is another level of intensity. And so with a team with not as much quality depth around them, you've got to find a way to be able to motivate and to do that. I know you don't think you have to do it at the World Cup, but I still think there's something there that was
yeah,
lacking a little bit. Not in a horrible way, because they a couple, again, I've said it for a long time. Get a couple bounces, get a little couple lucky whatevers, and the games change pretty quickly. I mean, Pulisic scores that goal. I think it's a different game, honestly, but he didn't, and so we gotta deal with what we have in front of us. But I think that to me, that's kind of what I took away from that. Wasn't horrible, but I don't for as well as Greg did in the first 3 matches. I kind of felt a little disappointed because a little bit with the tactics that he
yeah,
kind of did that, and maybe just giving that goal up in 10 minutes is tough too. It's not you just settling into the game at that point, and then you can't give a
yeah.
goal up at the second half, with no time left heading to halftime. So that's very different game, being down 1-0 as opposed to 2.
Look, I don't love XG stats in a game singularly because games are weird. Obviously, XG is a better stat from across a select population of games, but we created a couple of big chances that we weren't able to capitalize on. According to most metrics, we had about 1.49 expected goals, Netherlands at 1.67. So yeah, they created better scoring opportunities, but we also had ours, and I think that does go back to um, an issue that we've talked about a lot on this podcast, and people have talked about a lot is finishing. Um, but let's go through the lineup, and then we'll talk about the one person who I think we need to talk about most when it comes to finishing and creating goals. So the lineup for the U.S. was Matt Turner in goal, Serginho Dest, Walker Zimmerman, and Tim Ream, and then Anthony Robinson on that left side. Walker Zimmerman coming back after Cameron Carter-Vickers was playing in the Iran game. Your midfield, Adams, McKennie, Musa, and the front three, Tim Weah, Christian Pulisic out wide, but in the middle, for the first time all tournament at all, Jesus Ferreira. Now, I'm going to first defend Greg for a second before we attack him for this decision. My first defense is Josh Sargent was clearly hurt. Clearly, he did not play in the game. He still was clearly suffering from an ankle injury. Um, so that left you with Jesus Ferreira or Haji Wright. Now, Greg thinks that Jesus Ferreira is probably a better soccer player than Haji Wright. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't know if Jesus Ferreira performed up to the level that he probably can perform today, but we've often seen him underperform in matches that matter. I don't want to sit here and say that Greg got that decision wrong, because again, it was Haji Wright or Jesus Ferreira. And I know, Caleb, I'll let you talk about the false nine proposition, but at the end of the day, Jesus Ferreira let us down. I don't think Greg let us down by selecting Jesus Ferreira. But then we go back to roster construction. But in this match alone, I don't think Jesus was necessarily the wrong choice. It just didn't work out. Is that an okay statement, Caleb, or should I be harsher on Greg?
I think, I mean, it's kind of both his fault, because the reason there were only Ferreira and Haji to choose from was because of Pepe, Pepe is because of Berhalter in the first place, because he didn't bring a Jordan Pefok or Ricardo Pepe. You know, there are so many things where you can go and look at and say, well, if we could go back to World Cup qualifying and have some guys maybe integrate into the team, we wouldn't have such a depth issue, quote unquote. But with the players that were there, like you said, Josh was hurt. You look at what Haji Wright did in the game previously versus Iran, wasn't great. So you're pretty loaded. So yeah, there's some defense there. But then you look at the second half, and what does Greg do? He takes off Ferreira, who I'm with you. I think Ferreira's performance let us down more so than Greg's decision. I 100% agree with that. But you look at what Greg did in the second half, and he puts in Gio Reyna to play in a position, in a spot that I and other fans have been calling for over a year now. And it took Greg Berhalter to potentially his final match in charge of the U.S. men's national team, fingers crossed, to even try it. And what do you know? First 10 minutes that Reyna was on the field, he had already created more opportunities than Ferreira did in 45 minutes. Um, you know, I don't think it takes a genius to understand that or to see the possibility of even trying that. The fact that we had never tried it before is beyond me. You want to look at the talent that we have, and how can you get as much talent on the field at the same time? It jumps out at you. So the fact that it happened was great. The fact that it worked was great. The fact that it had never been tried before is absolutely ridiculous.
So in their each 45 minutes, and again, I think obviously we have to understand that Gio Reyna played a 45 minutes where we were gunning and pressing, and Netherlands were happy to sit back. But it's not like the Netherlands weren't not sitting back in the first half either. Gio Reyna, 38 touches to Jesus Ferreira's 24. Successfully received a pass 28 times and then progressed it 4 times to Jesus's 19 and 2. And then from a passing perspective, Jesus with 19 passes attempted to Gio's 34. And that right there is a big difference to me, is like when you're going into that false 9 spot, I mean, my interpretation of what a false 9 should be, your goal is to link with your midfielders and then other team players, whereas a traditional striker is supposed to be the one on the receiving end of all these passes. So the fact that Gio Reyna not only outperformed Jesus from a traditional striker role of passes received, but way outperformed him in the false 9 link up striker type role, to me, Thomas, that shows that Gio Reyna is probably more effective at this position than Jesus Ferreira, or is, at least in my opinion, just a better soccer player and therefore was able to execute that better. That said, the question then still goes back to, should Jesus Ferreira have started? That's a lot of words to say in together. So Thomas, like again, the question is, did Greg get it right by starting Jesus Ferreira? He's got a very pensive look on his face, y'all.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, no, he didn't get it right. He made the change when he had to. I mean, obviously, you're down 2-0. You've got to make a change. But Rain is a special talent. He's so special. Like, and the difference is that you can, and it's rare in my opinion. I've had some self-reflecting on playing players out of position, but Rain is a special player. I think he can play a lot of different spots, and so I think that's the fundamental difference when you look at a player of his time. He can do so many things in so many different areas, and so that's the frustration of why he didn't play more often in the tournament along the way. I mean, obviously, I think we're in the same spot whether he plays or not along the way. Maybe you win another match you didn't. I don't know, but I think ultimately that specialness is a little bit different. Um I mean, I honestly don't think Greg would have gone to him if they're down, 1-0 at halftime. I think he remains the same. I don't think he makes the sub, honestly.
Yeah.
At that time, but they were desperate and they needed that creativity to change things up. So he was forced to do that along the way. So and I don't want to go. The roster was the roster, so you had who you had in there. I mean, I think I would have probably gone with Wright, honestly. I think he did fine, in his, against England in general. In that role wasn't great. During Iran it wasn't great, but look, that's the problem with coming off the bench and subs. We saw it all tournament. We didn't see a lot of quality consistently for the U.S. with those subs coming off in general. So I think it's a reality.
We attempted 27 crosses. So between Gio and Jesus Ferreira, they're not guys that I'm going to put into the box to say, hey, they're going to win a cross. Now, I don't think Haji Wright's necessarily a fantastic aerial duelist, but just his height alone gives him a better advantage going against two guys in the back who are literally like 8 feet tall. So I kind of see your point, Thomas, especially knowing how this team tends to play. We led the tournament in crosses with like 93. So this is a team that very much crosses the ball into the box. So, and some of them, like the Iran game, were a lot better of like, oh, they were guided crosses. They were more pick out a guy and try to hit him. But we oftentimes see this team just hit a traditional lump the ball into the box type cross. So that to me is one reason why I would have started Wright instead of Ferreira, because the team just tends to play in a manner that is going to benefit Haji Wright a little bit more. That said, the rest of the lineup I thought was pretty much the same, but that I think we do need to talk about is maybe the problem, right? You played all but one other guy. You started one other guy on the field like every other match, right? The only other position that was even slightly rotated was center back. And that was just because Walker Zimmerman didn't start one match that he ended up playing in anyway. So again, we want to talk a little bit big picture, but also in this moment. But the big picture dictates why this moment was problematic. Caleb, we just don't have the depth right now that we need.
I mean, we don't. I think part of that is just, combination of the lost generation, the youth that we have, injuries obviously were a big part. Miles Robinson, Chris Richards, and then obviously I think it's fair to say that some of the depth issue is self-inflicted. Not bringing guys in, not getting their feet wet, not getting them integrated into the group. Um, you had a guy named Joe Scally. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Kind of a decent little prospect we've got going on. But I mean, the kid didn't play a single minute. When he's playing, I believe I saw a stat that says he's got the most minutes in top 5 leagues right now among our players, something like that. Or maybe it was just Germany. But either way,
That
the point is
doesn't
the
sound
kid's
wrong.
he's playing major minutes in a top 5 league, and he's playing well, and he didn't play a single minute. Um, so yeah, we can complain all day long about our lack of depth, but I think it's a manager's responsibility to turn over every leaf to figure out which ones can play, not just will this kid do what I want him to do when I want him to do it. and I think we have that a little bit um, with the current managers that we have.
Yeah. Thomas, you had 8 players play more than 300 minutes of the 360 of this tournament. 3 of those guys did play a full 360. Anthony Robinson played 359 technically minutes. Like, so let's give him 4 full matches basically, because the only reason he came out is because he was a little injured. Obviously in a tournament like this, you want to play your best players as much as you can. I think that's a fair goal. But the fact that we really just weren't able to rotate much of anyone does signal to me a problem with, again, maybe how we've built the team. But I think, again, to me, it's most indicative of the fact that outside of 12 guys, this player pool is not the high quality that I think we might think it is in our little US soccer Twitter sphere where we think all of our players are great.
Yeah, I mean, look, Greg obviously has, I want to say favorites, but he definitely has players he trusts more. Now, mind you, some of that's changed, from the beginning to the end along the way. I
I
mean,
mean, Tim
obviously,
Ream played 360 minutes, so there's
well,
one guy who
right,
changed.
well, exactly, and so that's a great example of. I mean, I'll give Greg credit in that because I did not expect that coming into the tournament. I expected Long to be locked into there, and Greg would have got crushed about enough stuff, but like Ream was great. He was great. He did what he needed to do. He's 35 years old, and he was great in that role. And I think when Greg didn't have confidence in other certain players coming in, it was the same typical subs in there. And Aronson did fine in his sub roles. I mean, he pretty much was in every match in that respect. Acosta not great. Wright came in not great in general, but like you look at that, he has to have a confidence, and I think that's when you look back at decision making in terms of who you're playing in tournaments, who you're calling into the to the Gold Cup. I mean, I understand there's you want to look at certain players along the way, but you have to be able to integrate. You cannot make an excuse of, oh, the players are getting ready for their club season. To start the season, you can't do that with a Gold Cup. You've got to get a look at these players. That's what that's for. And I don't think Greg did a great job of that. And I think obviously missing 2020 and Greg basically not being hired until the end of the 2018. He missed some opportunity to be able to do that. There was a year,
Yeah,
2 years missing there, and I think that's significant when we
yeah,
look at the player pool because it did evolve, along the way. But there is a lot of youth there that I think it's hard to see it all. And I think
yeah,
US soccer has to figure out how they're going to do better with that, how they're going to, structure that for the Olympics, for these
yeah,
youth tournaments. Like, cause that's where we've got to see these guys as well. How they're going to do that. I don't have any confidence right now they're going to do well at that. I really don't, because they haven't done well with that. And that's exposure. In my opinion, you bring a U20-ish team to that Olympics, and for the most part, I don't want U23 guys, Jackson Yule type players that you have to evaluate that who's coming up, not who's on the
yeah.
fringe of maybe being the 26th guy in the bench. I don't care about that. Fans don't care about that. You have to be able to build that depth, and that's how you have to do it. Do it that way, and
Right, and
and and that.
that's the problem to me. You just mentioned that. Like we were focused on, oh, Christian Roldan understanding the system because he's a good guy, or Jordan Morris, and it's just like, are they actually adding depth?
No, they're not. I mean, I don't think they are, because I mean, Morris, a healthy Morris with no ACL injuries, yeah, he's definitely going to provide value. Roldan, I mean, I guarantee Greg's thinking, geez, I would have loved to have Pepe or Jordan Peacock be able to come off the bench or start that game, as opposed to have a Roldan who, in my opinion, wasn't going to get touch the grass, during that World Cup. I don't think he had the role there, to do that. I don't think he had the skill to be able to play at that level, and that's the difference. Greg, he brought guys that he wanted so they could have the experience. Well, that's not fair to the program. That's not fair to the team that's worked so hard to get there. You bring 26 guys, you should expect they're all going to play. Brazil played
Yeah,
every one of their players, which is amazing, in their tournament.
yeah,
And they're the deepest team I've seen since probably the last World Cup with France.
yeah. Now, okay, I'm gonna give. I don't think this is entirely unreasonable to say this because we had 5 midfielders play in this tournament. We brought 7, so 2 midfielders stayed home. Tyler Adams looked gassed. Eunice looked gassed throughout the tournament. Weston McKinney was clearly battling an injury. So Caleb, like, why bring Christian Roldan or even, I mean, I hate to say it, Luca De La Torre, if you're not going to play him? Because clearly, I mean, if you don't think they're good enough to play in a match, but you're looking at your guys and going, man, they've played a lot of minutes. That's on you.
I mean, I think we're talking right now, we're talking about the biggest pain point that I know for me personally, this is the biggest pain point I've had with Greg Berhalter specifically. His roster management, his player selection, his lineup decisions have just been unbelievably frustrating consistently. Um, Tactically, he's shown growth. The players seem to like him. He builds a good culture. He recruits well, obviously. Um, all those things I could live with. But what he does with a roster is maddening to the point like I want to throw a chair through a wall sometimes based on his decisions. Uh, I mean, like we said, we dealt with depth, and yeah, maybe the guy, if let's say we don't bring Roldan and we bring a different guy, maybe it's not a massive step up, but at least he'd be useful
I
because,
mean, that's
like
the
Thomas
goal,
just
right?
said,
Like, be
Roldan
able to
was
play in a World Cup match.
right. If you're going to bring a guy, let them at least be useful. Berhalter was never going to play Roldan. Who was it? What team they brought a guy? He wasn't on the roster officially, but he went with the team. I forget who it was, but it's like bring Roldan to the World Cup as a coach. Who says you can't? Who says you can't? If you want him there that badly, there's no rules that says you can't do that. And then
Yep.
that way you have a spot on the roster for a Malik Tillman, who you might not start that kid because you don't know what you can trust for 90 minutes. But my God,
If
you
you
put him
need
on
a
for 10
goal,
minutes, you're chasing a goal. You've seen
exactly.
magic out of that kid. It's unreal. And there's no chance that we're sitting here talking about this stuff. We're not a licensed professional coach. Like that's not the caliber we are. But that what we're talking about right now, it's not rocket science. And it's so frustrating to look at the decisions that he's made and you're going, my God, my next door neighbor could have made that decision.
Eh, Thomas, I think that's kind of, again, where I look at the program as a whole and go, we're not good enough to leave off a guy from the roster just because another guy, Christian Roldan specifically, quote, fits the system or likes, knows the system or somehow is better in practice. Is he a good soccer player? Because I don't think Christian Roldan was a better soccer player than some of the midfield options we had and could have brought. And I feel justified by looking at the fact that he played 0 minutes in this World Cup in matches where a midfielder would have been helpful to bring on. Be it we needed to close out the game against England, close out the game against Iran, close out the game against Wales. You know, it's not like we were chasing goals in every game. We were in situations where we just needed possession type midfielders. And you know, obviously Luca De La Torre didn't play either. I think that was more of a case of him being hurt. But we're just not at that point where you can leave off a guy and bring a guy because, oh, well, you just kind of like him better as a person.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said. I mean, you look at the, Ronaldo situation. I mean, we don't have a player in terms of attitude wise that's bringing the team down, and that's a
Right.
conversation to have because I mean, I think a team of this core can not now, but down the road, they can absorb a one bad egg attitude type player and work through it. And so Roldan, he was a great, Rock'em guy, but that's it. That doesn't get you anything. Like you've got to be able to use all your chess pieces. And in my opinion, Greg's like, yeah, I'm gonna throw him the bone on that. And you honestly look at that Tiller must have been injured because there's no reason why he couldn't have gotten in there
Yeah.
either. And so then two bad decisions, you've got to be able to trust that. Again, that's on Greg a little bit, but it's also on the fact that whole thing was rushed. You know what I mean? We didn't have the build up, and I think
Yeah.
that's hard too, because you don't get a great evaluation along the way.
Yeah,
And
I think Luca De La Torre specifically in a normal World Cup year, you go, well, he kind of got hurt at the end of the season. We'll get him back, and then like you can make a final roster decision after you can actually evaluate him with your own eyes and your own people, or you have the whole 3 weeks leading up to a World Cup for him to actually get healthy instead of a week and a day for him to recover. But we're talking a lot about him, so let's just have this conversation, okay? Greg Berhalter, as we know, as has been reported, his contract ends at the end of this year. He was signed on through 2022, obviously for the World Cup. Now, obviously, when he was signed on back at the end of 2018, I think we were still expecting the World Cup to be in. I think we were still expecting this World Cup to be in the summer. I don't remember how many times this World Cup format has changed, but so traditionally, Berhalter or a coach, whatever, would have finished the World Cup and he would have had the September and November friendlies to see out the year and say, hey, thanks, but bye. Or he can say, I'm done, but whatever. Greg clearly has no intentions of, I'm saying this, I know there have been people who have surmised otherwise, but he doesn't seem to have any intentions of stepping away despite accomplishing what I think we would all agree is like the minimal expectation for a team. He did the thing like congratulations, you passed type of performance from me. Did he look better? Yeah, but the criteria he met were you passed. You maybe got a C. Maybe I'll give him that, right? But now we have a camp in January that we're going to need a coach for. The question now comes to, is Greg the person to keep I think this is my question right now. Is Greg the guy to continue to progress this team and this program forward? That's my question. We can talk about my next question later on, but like right now, the question is Greg the guy to continue to take this team and continue to improve them? Caleb, is Greg the guy?
For me, no, and there's a lot of reasons why. I mean, one, I'm just not a huge fan of a coach going multiple cycles. I've just never been a huge fan of that.
And before you get going more on that, because I agree with you, he's been here for almost the entire cycle. That also needs
Mhm.
to be said. It's not like he got hired in 2021. He has been here for basically the entire cycle. So 100% agree with you. Just wanted to make sure that people understand he's had 3 years to put this
Mhm.
team together and build it in his image.
Yeah, he had, pretty much 3 quarters. There's, the COVID year messed things up a little bit, but, for the most part, he had a full cycle to do what he wanted to do, and he did exactly what he wanted to do, regardless of what anybody else said, or what else made sense. I think, we were talking earlier about Tim Ream and how well Tim Ream played and how unexpected it was. Um, Tim Ream's leadership, his experience, his ability to pass was vital, came up huge in so many moments. And there's a player, I think maybe it's John Brooks. I don't know if you guys, I think it's John Brooks. Obviously, I'm being facetious. You can't tell me that John Brooks' playing style, which is, I mean, they're kind of a like for like as far as a ball playing, not necessarily a super athletic center back. But you can't tell me that he wouldn't have been able to help. But we left him out because of Berhalter's stubbornness, his inability to get along with players. There have been several players. Miazga's come out and said stuff. We've seen some stuff going on with Gio Reyna, one of the most, if not the most talented player in our pool. That kind of stuff really bothers me. Unless a player comes out and, has an affair with another player's girlfriend or wife or
Yeah,
something
because
that's
that would never happen
creating
with the U.S. men's national team.
never, it's never happened. nor with MLS teams. But obviously, those are like extreme circumstances, extreme situations that are going to cause massive issues in the locker room. I get that. That's completely separate. Unless that's happening, everything else, get a team counselor, work on it, be big boys and big girls, figure some stuff out, and you play your most talented players. Period. And I feel like Berhalter doesn't understand. It's not a club situation, big dog. You don't get to say, I don't like this guy. Let me go get somebody else that works better, who fits better, who's going to do everything I say, who's going to be a puppet. You can't do that with a international player pool. Not to mention, we're not France. France could probably do that because they're so daggone deep. Yeah, like you don't like this guy? Okay, cool. Here's another world-class player. We don't have that luxury. And Greg doesn't seem to understand that. And it is beyond frustrating for me. I want to see someone who has fresh ideas, fresh eyes, who understands the international game a little bit better because I think that's something that people aren't talking about. Yeah, our team was young, our team was inexperienced. So was our coach. So maybe with the brightest generation that we have going into a World Cup where we're going to be on home soil, maybe let's go get somebody who has that experience.
On the same question to you, do you believe that Greg Berhalter is capable of progressing this team beyond what we saw in this tournament?
I don't. I think I think the team would probably perform fine leading up to it. I think there's a lot of unknowns in a cycle that doesn't result in World Cup qualifying. How are you going
Yeah,
to manage that?
yeah.
I think he's going to be re-upped. I honestly do. Um, I
I
think
think you're right.
what I think is the rumors are true. This team is going to be playing in Copa America, and if this team does not, in my opinion, advance to the semifinals of that tournament, they're going to get rid of Greg. Because I think you have to play at that level. It's a tournament that you can make it that far. It's a tournament. It's a tournament you could potentially win with the group of people we have in general going into it. So I think that expectation needs to be there because that is probably about the only quality tournament we're going to be able to come up with between now and the World Cup, unless they do some sort of old US Cup type thing during the summer where they get a couple round robins to do that. That's possible, but so we'll
Yeah,
see. I mean, we'll see that. I think he's back. I do, because if you look at the history of it, in performance wise, they're happy with what they did.
yeah,
They got, they're happy with what they did. You look back through, Bradley got it advanced, Arena got advanced, and then Arena got quickly dropped after 06. He didn't,
yeah.
his last match was the World Cup match. Klinsmann, same thing. Samson was terrible, so he was gone, and Bora was only here for for that run anyway. So, and that was kind of expected, but I think they're, I I hate to say it. I don't want. I don't think he's a coach to do that. The
Yeah.
international experience is huge when you're looking at those tournaments and that experience. I don't think Greg's be able to do that. I still think he can't get out of his head about how he's doing that. His attitude towards the media, his attitude towards the different things show that he's insecure with that. It shows that he's not capable of being able to handle that heat along the way. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm not liking where where it's going from that perspective. And even the players, I just don't, they only showed players that are probably aging out, or MLS players
Yeah.
that said, yeah, they'd be happy to have Greg back.
I
Where
don't.
are the
Yeah, I
other
don't want to be an asshole. I just don't care that Sean Johnson or Tim Ream wants Greg to stick around. Like they're inconsequential for the next cycle.
right?
Like I
I
hate to
want to
say
hear what
it,
the
you know.
yeah. I
Right.
want to hear what Plissick and Adams and McKinney have to say, because look, those guys are handled themselves very well. You could definitely see there was times when they were frustrated with Greg throughout qualifying and
Right.
around that. So where are their comments? And maybe they're just not commenting because they're being professional in the
I don't
moment, or
necessarily need them to, right? Because
yeah,
like I
yeah,
don't want them to come trash a coach, but like I think that I would value their opinions more than Christian Roldan and Sean Johnson and even Tim Ream, who I respect as a player, but like you're not the one. You're not going to be in it moving forward. You're like, thank you, Tim Ream. You have played your final match as a U.S. men's national team player, unless you get like a send off maybe in March. I don't know. Um, I want to go through. I want to read a tweet from Ryan Rosenblatt, who formerly was in charge of Stars and Stripes FC, but always has some nuanced takes, at least, on the U.S. men's national team. And he said Greg Berhalter did a good job rebuilding the USMNT program and setting it up for the future. But one, international managers should rarely get a second cycle. And two, the job of the next cycle is going to be very different than this cycle. Thanks, Greg, and time for a new manager. And I agree with him on both points. And I think we've all three said it. Giving a manager a second cycle is not a great idea. But we're at a level here that Greg brought us to, and he was actually an okay person to do that. I don't think there were many other coaches who would have been better at what he did in terms of like trying to kind of bring us into modern footballing tactics. I know we all have our issues with Greg's tactically, but like he at least was trying to play a style of soccer with this team that was more modern than we've ever really seen it. And don't talk to me about what Jurgen Klinsmann did. The man bunkered. I saw people saying, "Oh, well, Jurgen Klinsmann did better in the round of 16 than Greg." No, he did not. Tim Howard did better in the round of 16. No, Jurgen scared shitless because he's a coward of a person who doesn't actually back up what he says. But whatever. Point is, the next manager for me has to be the guy you think is going to win you the World Cup in 2026. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we have to win the World Cup in 2026. I'm not foolish. But you're hosting the damn thing with inarguably your best talent pool ever and should even get better by 2026. Your manager better be the guy who you think is going to win the tournament, not someone who you think is going to create a style of play that everyone's going to love and play around the country. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit if we have a universal style of play because our national team manager made it so. No, that's not that's not the job of the national team manager. And two, that's almost impossible to do in this country. I want a manager who's going to win the 2026 World Cup. And I'm telling you right now, I have zero confidence Greg is that guy.
I mean, you look at what you just said, you know, coaches bringing a style of play to a national team. Look at Spain. They have a style of play. What has it done for them in the last two World Cups? Oh, not much. I don't care about style of play. The World Cup is a tournament. You have to do what Greg did, to his credit, versus England. You change it up based on who you are playing. That is how you manage a tournament. Who am I playing? How can I set up tactically to take advantage of what they're going to give me to make it more difficult for them to play against me? That is what you do as a manager for a national or for an international team, for a country when you were playing in a tournament. You're not playing a full season. You're not trying to impose your will unless you're a Man City. Unless you know that you are head and shoulders above the competition that you're playing. You don't
Well, and the problem with the
it's not that
style
you
of
don't,
play
you
like
can't.
that, yeah, like the problem with the style of play, like, okay, Pep has a very good style of play and it's worked in a lot of places because he's able to get the players that work for him. Jose Mourinho is a very successful manager because he's able to find players that play the way he wants to play. We don't have that luxury at the international level. You have to select the players who you have in your country, and to obviously you can go steal guys like Yunus Musa and Anthony Robinson, but like that's who you
You s
have.
you see it. You see it on the club level too. You have coaches that it's a very romantic idea of the game. They step into a role and they want to play a specific style. And it's like, okay, look, but you're not at Real Madrid, Barcelona, Man City, Liverpool, Bayern Munich, PSG. You're not at a club that is going to go spend more money that is like just out of reason within reality. You can't do that. you have to have players that are head and shoulders above and beyond the competition being faced to play that style. It's just the way that it is. Berhalter wants to do that. You can't, but he's so stubborn that there's no way he doesn't realize it. I don't know. I don't get it, but it's extremely frustrating. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I don't care about the style of play or whether it is an identity. No, no. Do we go out there and scrap and give it everything we have and come back with results? Because that's what I care about. I
Yeah.
don't care about XG. I don't care about possession numbers. I care about results. It is a result driven position, and I don't think he's the man for it. I would love to see a big name because let's be honest, the the managerial spot for the U.S. men's national team is going to be a
I would
big
hope it would
position
be.
in
Yes, I
world
would hope it would
football
be.
for this next cycle because of the profile, not because of the talent or who we are as a soccer nation,
I mean, that
but
adds
because
to it,
of
though, in my opinion.
no, of course it does. But I mean, just look at it's going to be in the U.S. We have the uh, golden generation, quote unquote, coming into this next cycle. It's a big, high profile gig. So yeah, there's probably going to be some big names out there who are willing to give it a shot. So yeah, let's kick the tires on that. If we can't, I'm going to be honest. I'll throw out a name: Steve Cherundolo. He has a pedigree.
Yeah.
He has a profile of experience in Europe and in extreme high intensity, uh, high stress situations. You know, you talk about promotion relegation. He gets that. He understands the international game. He understands the U.S. men's national team. Uh, and then he comes over, takes a role in MLS with LAFC, and does what he does in his first year. That's someone that I would at least like to give an opportunity to if there's no massive name that comes calling.
Right. Now, I do want to make sure that I think I don't want to speak for you, Caleb, but I think we're on the same page of like, it's not that we don't want a style of play, right? Styles of play could just be we want to be proactive. We would like to be a possession oriented team. But, you know, the way that Greg approached style of play, his
Correct.
system was way too rigid. You know, because
Yes.
Spain, as you mentioned, is a great example of a super rigid system. Whereas Brazil's system or style of play is very identifiable, but it's not rigid. I mean, I think that would actually be one of the tenets of the style, the system, or the style of play is that it's not rigid. It's however you want to interpret it.
Right.
But you know,
Yeah. I don't want
we want
Jurgen
to
Klinsmann again.
right, and but my point is, Steve Cherundolo, I think, would be a guy who would carry on that type of soccer that we want to see, right? A guy who would much rather have the ball than not have it. A guy who would rather us be connecting passes and kicking it long. Those are the things
Well,
that we're talking about.
I think he's a guy who understands that you play based on the players that you have.
Yeah,
And
right.
yeah, he's playing in a or he's managing a club that's going to go out and get him players, but he's going to put his players in the positions to succeed. I think he understands that. I think he understands that it's about results,
Yeah.
not about, you know, but look how much possession we had. We dominated Canada. Oh, okay. Well, we have different definitions of that word.
Well, we lost 2-0. So you tell me how we dominated, right? I do want to kind of allow people to understand that there's this potential reality out there. So go with me, Thomas, on this journey. We are 3.5 years from the World Cup here in the US. I think a lot of international managers do see this or should see this as a very good potential job, right? You have, again, a burgeoning talent pool, not even burgeoning, a good talent pool with talent coming up behind it. Players who are, for the most part, fun, flashy, exciting players to watch. You have a team that's going to be hosting the tournament pretty much in their entire country and possibly be the biggest sporting event in the country's history up to this point. Those are big positives for a coach to want this. But I think there's a reality where that coach doesn't want to start in 2023 and go all the way through 2030, 2026 without having to qualify and all these things. It's very possible that US soccer won't be able to hire that person who, as I said, would win us the World Cup because I just don't want to take it right now. Is that something that you can envision? So like maybe it's well, Greg Berhalter stays on for another year or two because we're not going to get just go with me Zidane. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because you look at you look at a lot of managers. Van Gaal is a great example. He's coached the Netherlands, 3 times at the World Cup, and so
Yeah.
what
I
he
don't
did
think he's
wasn't
really coached through a full cycle though.
right. Exactly. He came on halfway through, so I'm pretty sure he either came on before or after the Euros, and so that's the thing. If U.S. Soccer wants to do that and maybe make it clear, look, Greg's gonna be the care the he's gonna take care of the team come, this time we're gonna, over the next year, we're gonna look for another manager to fill that and come in and bring their, evaluation, set up, and make the team strong based on the players that are available, and then play in the Copa Americas. Because I think you miss an opportunity if you don't have the manager coach in the Copa Americas as got a coach in the World Cup. I know there's two years between that, but I think it's a critical tournament. It's a critical tournament to evaluate your pool, critical tournament to evaluate, what works, what doesn't work from a style of play, because that's where you're going to see some good competition, 2 or 3 dominant, South American teams, in that tournament, maybe other teams, that get in there, depending on how many other, teams, are going there. But I think you have to have that. You have to give them an opportunity. A Gold Cup's not going to tell you that. You know what I mean? Unless they decide they want to expand the Gold Cup and bring in, other nations like they have done in the past in the early stages of the Gold Cups. But that's critical. I could see Greg holding on, but as a fan, I would want to know that. I'd want to have that transparency, to say, hey, look, this is what the plan is, and I
Absolutely.
think that's fine
I,
because it's typical with some of these national teams to just do that. Here's your 2 years, here's your run out, no qualifying in this case, so you're gonna have to figure it out because it's
yeah.
gonna be a different. I don't know how they're gonna manage it. I don't know who they're gonna play in these friendlies. I don't know what they're going to do. That to me, that's concerning because it's
Yeah.
like, how do you do that? Like, how do you, because everyone else is going to be in qualifying and there's going to be more teams further in the tournament qualifying. So you're not going to have any opportunity to play anyone. And maybe the South American teams, maybe, but because there's only 10 teams there and theirs is pretty compressed at the end of this, end of the cycle.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you were to tell me like, hey, we're going to extend him for the 2023 year, I'd go, fine. Because to his credit, we do have a Nations League that he has started. So, okay, fine. See out the Nations League, get the 2023 Gold Cup. I do think that Greg, I'll give him a little bit of credit. I think he would be, I think he will be willing to drop players and bring new guys in. I'm not saying all of them. He obviously has his favorites, but when you look at what the 2026 team will look like, it definitely does not include guys like Jordan Morris and Christian Roldan for a number of reasons. But number one, age wise, you're not going to keep Sean Johnson, probably. Maybe you do just from a like, well, I, I will say this multiple times. Gaga Slonino is not it yet, and that's fine. But you still have 3 goalkeepers in Turner, Steph, and Horvath who are in a perfect age for goalkeepers to progress. Obviously, Tim Ream's probably going to go by the wayside just because he's 35, and who knows, this might even be his last year playing at Fulham. We just, we don't know. So there's going to be natural turnover for a lot of reasons. And we've seen Greg be open to bringing in younger players. He's just been hesitant to fully bringing them in. So I don't think it would necessarily be like a lost year if you kept him on for another year. But I'm just going to reiterate, I don't, and I agree with you, Thomas. I don't want Greg coaching at the 2024 Copa America because I think that's the tournament you lure a big name in and say you can go coach the U.S. at Copa America in preparation for the 2026 World Cup 2 summers after that. And that is a great way to pitch it to whomever you're trying to get.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the carrot. I think that's what you got to go for. I mean, you can't. you just can't be, oh, Greg was great. We own this. You don't own that. You don't owe anyone anything. You don't owe any players anything. Your goal is to, make the most of this, because there's a lot of money. The World Cup records for attendance and viewership, they go back to 1994. They're going to blow the doors off this. So you have that
Yeah.
opportunity. You have that platform to be able to do that. And again, you're right. There's a lot of managers that are going to want this, but maybe not right this second. You know what I mean? Maybe not right this second. Maybe it's in September. Maybe it's after the club season, after the Gold
Right.
Cup. Maybe that's what it is.
I mean, that's exactly it. You might want to wait till May, June, whenever that is, that you have a club season ending. Who gets fired? Who doesn't? Who knows? Or you can lure them away from the club season. I mean, obviously, there are names in this World Cup coaching right now that you could maybe lure to come over to the U.S. I know Caleb is going to pitch Luis Enrique to come coach the U.S. team, I'm sure. But there are guys that you may not know that are available right yet, because you just don't know until after this World Cup. You probably won't know until after this club season. So again, I just Caleb, are you going to be okay if it's like, hey, we're going to keep him on for another year, or like, are you just like done with Greg?
I mean, I think we have to be okay. Like Thomas said, he thinks it's going to happen. Doug McIntyre, I believe, has come out and said they're working on an extension. Um, that's the reality we're
Which
living
I
in. It's
assume they
probably
are
going to
just from
happen.
a standpoint of like, duh, you're going to be talking to your
That's what you're
current
supposed to do.
coach. Right.
Sure. And hopefully that's all it is. Um, and maybe we're talking about this for not, but most likely, and I've felt like it all along, if he got out of the group, he was probably going to get the next cycle so they can see, and continue to build on what we've done, whatever. But my thing is, coaching matters, and there's no better story to kind of exemplify that than Morocco. Morocco
Hmm.
fires their coach 3 months before the World Cup. 3 months! And look what they're doing. He didn't have a huge run up, but he's a coach that clearly had the attention of the players. He was the right man for the job, and he's doing the job. That's the thing. If you get the right man for the job, it doesn't matter how long they have, in my opinion, they're going to get the best out of the group. And with the talent that we have, and I guess that's probably the most important thing. Let me back up and say that. If Morocco didn't have talent, it doesn't matter what coach they bring in. They could bring in Pep Guardiola. Like, it doesn't matter. If you don't have talent, you're not going anywhere. Talent always wins. You know, I I
Yeah.
coach I coach 10-year-old, going on 11-year-old boys. I could be the greatest coach in the world, but when I'm going up against these, club teams in, Gwinnett, that these kids train 4 times a day, and they're freaking homeschooled, and they're doing individual training on top of their training, and all they do is train together, and those teams are incredible. Like, it doesn't matter how good I am, my talent that I have just can't do the job. So I think it's in tandem. You have to have the talent, but if we go out and get the right guy, I don't care necessarily about his pedigree, but it can't be a guy who is going to take talent and then sit them down because the talent doesn't want to do
Right.
everything they say and jump as high as they want them to jump when they say jump, if that makes sense.
Um, any parting thoughts from this tournament, Thomas, that you just kind of want to make sure that people hear from you?
Yeah, the tournament's been great. I mean, I've enjoyed. I've watched just about every match, from start to finish. Um, you know, it's it's the top of the mountain for me, as far as soccer goes. It's the top of the mountain. It's the best of the best. It's countries versus countries, and we've seen some amazing results in this tournament. Some shocking upsets in the group stage. I would just say, if this is the first time you're watching it, or if this is the only thing in it, try to find a club locally, domestically, internationally. Follow a player, follow the players. Just one of the things that I do, and it's really got me more into it, is just go on, what is it, Fobo, whatever it is, and start following the U.S. players. Follow them, see when they start, see when they play, follow their stats, because I think that's how you're going to get more into it. You're going to start following them. You're like, wow, there's so and so starting today. Like, and do that, and then you're going to start really seeing, how good these players are when you start following them and seeing them at the club level. Because watching Reyna when he plays is unbelievable. Watching Pulisic when he plays is unbelievable. Adams, he came into his own kind of at the right time. His timing was perfect for this World Cup with a form he was playing at the level he was playing. He was primed for this. So he had a great tournament from that respect. So do that as a fan. Don't just wait for next 4 years or just to Copa America. Follow this team, throughout. There's a lot of great content creators. Three of the best here on this podcast, but they're out there. Follow them. I know I'll have plenty of stuff coming out, and just, yeah, just do that, because you're missing out for a 4-year gap between these or any international stuff along the way. And it's a lot more accessible now than it was when I was growing up. So
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think I would echo that. There's more than just the World Cup to watch soccer for. Caleb, parting thoughts from you about this tournament as a whole.
Yeah, I'll echo some of the things Thomas just said. It's not the end of the world. It is what it is. It's really sad, disappointed that we're out, but the future's so bright. There's so many things to be excited about and look forward to. Um, you know, you've got Copa America, you've got Gold Cup, you've got Nations League. Like are there's big games. Is it the World Cup? No, but there's a lot of soccer out there. Um, I've told my family friends that text me like, "What do you think?" My players, my students, like, guys, you have to understand, our it just wasn't necessarily our time yet,
Hmm. Hmm.
but that time could potentially be in 2026. It just really, really, like, honestly speaking, there's potential there. And I'll go one further, Thomas, than you. You talked about, find a club and start following them, watch them. I would encourage, if you're new and you started to kind of have your interest peaked by watching the World Cup, go to a match, because there is no substitute for being in the stands watching a game live. I've seen people who, they watched a game or two, couldn't really get into it. They went to a match, boom. It was like something snapped, and now they follow it. They're active on Twitter. They're, you know, buying jerseys, kits, watching the World Cup, not even just US, they're watching other matches as well. Um, because it's a fever and it gets going, and it's a really cool thing. Jump on the bandwagon now before it's the hip thing to do. Right? That way you can be cool, right? That way you can sit there and talk about how you saw the band play in the garage, right? Um, but yeah, I think just the excitement of the future. That's the nugget that we got to hold on to.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate those thoughts. I just want people to understand that FIFA does not own soccer, does not own this sport. US
Mm.
soccer doesn't own this sport in this country. These are just bodies that put on tournaments and make things a little bit more organized. This sport was, and should always be for and by the people. Gabriel Heinze, when he was in his early days at Atlanta United, said, "Football es de la gente," right? Football is of the people. And it requires people to make it better. It requires people to keep it going. Um, there's a lot of people who I saw during this World Cup making a lot of noise online, showing up to games, to watch parties. Like that's fantastic. I am so happy to see that. I love the attention the sport gets during these times. But there's a lot of those people who claim to be big soccer fans, but all they do is tweet about it. And, they're making the sport better by watching it on TV for sure, because in this country, that matters. Proving that people want to watch the sport matters. We have plenty of outlets to do that, plenty of ways to watch the guys who you just saw play for the red, white, and blue for their club teams. But there are other ways to make the sport better and to continue to improve it. I would encourage anyone to go get a coaching license, go get a referee license, start actively trying to make the sport better in your local area. And if you don't have the time or money to do that, you can volunteer at your local club. All these clubs need a field manager. They need someone who can be there to just be on the sidelines to make sure the gates are open and the lights are on. Volunteer at the concession stand. Volunteer, to even just coach a rec team. If you have that time, consider giving that to the sport, because all three of us on this podcast invest a lot of time and energy into the sport beyond just talking and tweeting about it. And that's going to be the way that we continue to progress the sport in this country, and how we get to the point where we are at the Netherlands level, where we've been doing this for so long that it's in our blood. That's our responsibility as soccer fans in this country, is to continue to make it our sport, not the sport of US Soccer or FIFA. So with that, again, thanks everyone for listening. Caleb, you can follow him at USMNT Corner. You can follow Thomas at US Keeper. You can also find some of Thomas's written work at chasingacup.com. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks you two gentlemen for being on here with me. I'm Bart. I'm out.